Welcome back. Some very interesting dynamics are happening right now to the US housing market. So in today's video, we're going to talk about asking prices, housing inventory, price reductions, and much more. This is based on my nerdy analysis of Realtor.com's latest data just announced last week. And of course, I have a lot to share in today's video. If you guys get any value out of today's video, then please hit the like button. Also, my voice is a little bit deeper today because I have a cold. Anyways, I want to make this video for you guys because it's been I haven't been posting as much as I would have liked. So here's the article from them, just posted on October 10th. And of course, I did not even read it. Instead, go to realtor.com/research/data. Click on that link right there. Make sure you're looking at weekly inventory. And when you do that, it takes you to more or less this information. The most recent week we have from them is for the week ended October 5th. Let's first talk about asking prices. And by the way, these are changes from 1 year ago on a national level. Asking prices of people listing their houses for sale. That actually decreased by 0.1% compared to the same time frame in 2023. This marks the 16th consecutive week in which asking prices are down compared to the previous 12 months. Asking prices, of course, are down because inventory is much higher today than it was 12 months ago. And of course, home sales are still relatively low as well. In my opinion, home sales will not improve very much unless rates and/or home prices decrease. And in fact, about 1 month ago, mortgage rates decreased to the low sixes. Now we're in the mid 6% range. And back when rates decreased in the low sixes, we saw an increase of refis, but also an increase of people applying for a mortgage as well. And we also saw an uptick in pending home sales as well, or not as big of a decrease compared to the previous weeks. Let's just say that. But that actually got reversed though, because over the past week or so, rates have increased. Now we're approaching about 2-month highs right now compared to the 1.5-year lows we saw about 1 month ago. In any case, let's talk about active listing count, which is another word to say inventory levels. The amount of houses for sale nationwide increased by 30.5%. Inventory has been higher compared to the previous year, now for 48 consecutive weeks, going all the way back until mid-November 2023. So we're very close to basically a year, which every week we had more inventory levels compared to the previous year. The good news for home buyers regarding this is that you have more negotiating power. If you want to see home prices decrease greatly, we want to see inventory surging, but inventory up by 30.5% means that overall on a national level in general, home buyers have more negotiating power with home sellers. And of course, you have more negotiating power when you have a glut of inventory, like areas in Texas and Florida, for example. And here's an example I shared with you guys about 2 weeks ago. I have a client who's buying a house for $775,000, and the seller is giving him a $10,000 closing cost credit. In other words, his out-of-pocket expenses in buying the house decreased by $10,000. The seller's contributing that. On top of that, they're paying about $40,000 in order to pay off the solar on the house. So that's approximately $50,000 in benefits or concessions that are given to my home buyer. In other words, around 6% of the sales price as an incentive for my buyer. As I mentioned below, this is much different than 2021 and the spring home buying season of 2022. In my area, of course, the greater Sacramento area, a lot of home buyers were writing offers way over asking, waiving their appraisal contingencies, or offering to pay a set dollar amount over the appraised value. And on top of that, we're getting many offers, people waiving all contingencies as well. A very unhealthy housing market back then. Now, it's still competitive, but not nearly as competitive as it was the past couple of years. As I shared in this example, where my buyer is getting $50,000 in a benefit or concessions from the home seller. However, the bad news for home buyers right now is the growth rate on a year-over-year basis has basically been stagnant for inventory levels. So it's basically been stagnant for about 5 months. Year-over-year gains in the range of 30 to about 38% year-over-year since May this year. Also, the 30.5% gain we saw last week is actually the smallest increase since the week ended April 13th this year. Here's my key takeaway for you guys. So let me comment below with your thoughts regarding this. inventory growth has been stagnant mainly from a low amount of new supply hitting the market or a lack of new listings. So for example, since early May this year, new listings have been up from a year ago by only single digits, less than 10%. Prior to that, it was on the rise by more than 10% for the previous 2 consecutive months. Let's also have a look at altosresearch.com regarding inventory levels. Their most recent stats, is for the week ended October 11th this year. According to them, there's 732,000 houses for sale. This is higher than last year at 546,000. Higher than 2022 at 567,000, and of course, way higher than 21 and 2020. However, though, at 732,000 this year, we're still approximately, I think it's 22% less than the same time frame, more or less, in 2019. Back then, there was 922,000 houses for sale. Also, on a side note, it appears that inventory levels has peaked for the year. So for the week ended September 27th, there was 731,000 houses for sale. The week after that, a small gain up to 734,000, and now it decreased. Now it's at 732,000. This would be entirely normal to see inventory decrease. We saw a late peak in 2023, which was more or less in November, mid-November, highly unusual. We also saw that in 2022. But inventory peaked around September in 2021, whereas in 2020, a very abnormal year in which rates fell greatly, and of course, inventory absolutely plummeted that year. Therefore, based on my nerdy analysis, we have a gain of around 34% of inventory looking at altosresearch.com. So right now, there's around 233,000 more houses for sale compared to the start this year. That's a growth rate of 47% year to date. Compare that to the same time frame last year, we were only up by about 16%. So in other words, inventory is growing much faster this year than it was last year. What's also interesting as well is that it's also rising much faster than pre-COVID levels. Housing inventory rose on average by 16% from January through August in 2017 through 2019. Compare that to a gain of 37% so far this year, January through August. But the increase this year is much less than what happened in 2022. Back then, inventory surged up by 93% during the same time frame. And again, compare that to only a gain of 37% year to date this year. This, my friends, is why I do not expect to see a sharp pullback in home prices and sales like we saw in 2022, because inventory was skyrocketing 2 years ago. This year, it's up greatly, but not skyrocketing like it did in 22. However, home price growth should slow down though due to 4 main reasons. Number 1, the decline of asking prices, like I mentioned earlier in this video, more inventory, seasonality, in other words, the housing market tends to slow down in the winter months, and number 4, a sluggish rate of home sales on a national level. To summarize, inventory is rising more than twice as fast this year than it was looking at the same time frame during pre-COVID, but significantly slower than 2022. Lastly, it's 21% lower than pre-pandemic levels going back to the week of 2019 during the same time frame. All right, that's inventory levels. Let's talk about new listings or new supply hitting the market, the amount of people listing their houses for sale, which is a big contributor to the rise of inventory levels, but something has changed here because last week it rose by 8% year over year. So now new listings have either gone down slightly or increased by less than 10% since the end of July. In contrast, they rose by over 10% from February through April this year. Therefore, the growth rate of new supply hitting the market or new listings has stalled out, causing inventory growth to also stall as well. So let's take a look at that. Ever since really July 20th, we've been seeing gains of less than 10%. And also we saw decreases in mid-August. So new listings only increasing by less than 10%, which is contributing to the kind of slowdown of inventory growth during that same time frame. So for example, the week ended July 20th, we were up by nearly 37%. Now we're only up by about 30.5% year over year. All right, let's change gears slightly here and talk about days in the market, or how fast or how slow houses are selling. Last week, it took 8 days longer on average to sell a house, the same time frame last year, of course. This marks the 22nd consecutive week in which homes are taking longer to sell. This is much different compared to October of 2023 through March this year, when homes were selling faster than the previous 12 months. Let's talk about the impact to the housing market regarding this. So inventory is higher than last year from homes taking longer to sell, and sales remaining relatively low as well. However, new listings have basically lost momentum altogether, which is keeping a lid on the growth rate of housing supply. In contrast, imagine a scenario in which homes are taking longer to sell and new listings were up by 30% or more than that. That would cause inventory or supply to absolutely skyrocket as well, which of course would put downward pressure on home prices. Right now, though, we're seeing just the opposite, though, because we are up by 30% regarding supply, but new supply in the market has lost momentum, rising by less than 10% ever since the end of August this year. Before I share a summary of today's video, let's talk about the increase in the number of reduced price listings. That rose by 24.4% year over year last week. The number of price drops has been higher than last year for the past 37 consecutive weeks. However, the gains more or less have been muted compared to the triple-digit increases we saw from November 2022 through March of 2023. If you want to see home prices fall greatly, we would need to see inventory absolutely skyrocketing, which of course would cause price reductions to also skyrocket as well. Now, speaking of price reductions, let's take a look at Altos. Regarding the share of price drops, it's at more or less 40% right now, which means that 4 of every 10 homes for sale have reduced their asking prices. That's a share at 40%. That's higher than the same time frame last year when we were at 38%, but lower than the same time frame 2 years ago at 42%. But at 40%, of course, we're higher than 21 and 2020, but we're also higher compared to pre-COVID levels. Back in late October 2019, the share of price drops was only 37%. All right, if you guys are still watching today's video, then please hit the like button. I also consider subscribing as well. I want to share a summary because, of course, that was a lot of numbers thrown at you. So number one, asking prices are down year over year for the past 16 consecutive weeks. This is from an increase, a misspelling there, an increase in the number of houses for sale. In other words, more sellers have to compete against each other, causing asking prices to decrease. Much different than we saw the past several years in which asking prices were skyrocketing because we had a lack of houses for sale, and therefore home buyers were competing against each other greatly, not home sellers. The decline in asking prices can also be tied to the sharp run-up in home prices over the past several years, which is keeping buyers on the sidelines, of course. Number two, housing inventory increased by about 30% year over year last week, but the growth rate has basically been stagnant for 5 months. Gains pegged around 30 to 38% for 5 months. Also, the 30% increase we saw last week was the smallest gain we've seen since mid-April this year. In my opinion, inventory gains are losing momentum from a slowdown in the number of new listings or a slowdown of people listing their houses for sale. However, we're still down by about 23% compared to the same time frame in 2019. And of course, real estate is regional and local. So for example, as of September, according to data from Realtor.com, based on a report from ResiClub.com, there's now 7 states that have more existing houses for sale compared to the same time frame, September of 2019. This is a fairly significant increase from the only 4 states that were up compared to 2019 that we saw back in August. Now this September, there's 7 states. Those 7 states are Texas, They have 10% more homes for sale this September compared to September of 2019. Idaho is also up by 10%, Florida up by 9%, Utah and Colorado saw a gain of 4%, and Arizona is up by 3%, and the seventh state is Tennessee, up by 11% from 5 years ago. On top of that, there's only 4 states that are not too far behind as well. Those 4 states are Washington, Oregon, Oklahoma, and Alabama. They have less than 10% fewer houses for sale this September compared to 2019. In general, and this is kind of the reason why I'm talking about this, in general, the areas and states that have more homes for sale compared to pre-COVID levels are areas in which home price growth are slowing down greatly or home prices are down year over year. Number 3, we all know that the majority of homeowners have a locked 30-year fixed rate mortgage rate that's far less than today's rates. Again, today's rates are in the mid 6% range, but 70% of homeowners who do have a loan on the house have a rate below 5%. And of course, that has been limiting the amount of people who are listing their houses for sale. And therefore, we're no longer seeing double-digit gains of new supply in the market like we saw back in February and March. This is my opinion regarding this, but I do not expect to see a surge of new listings unless people are forced to sell their houses. And in that case, that'd be probably a spike of unemployment, which would cause people to list their houses for sale. Until then, unless mortgage rates decrease greatly, causing homeowners to get off the sidelines, I would imagine that new supply or new listings will remain relatively muted in the coming months. Number 4, the share of price reductions is slightly higher than last year, but lower than the same time frame 2 years ago. Also, in a span of 6 months in 2022, the share of price drops skyrocketed from 17% to 40%. In other words, more than doubling in about 6 months. Compare that to this year, it has only increased from 30%. Now it's at 39%. Number 5, last week, houses on average took 8 days longer to sell. Also, homes have been sitting on the market longer compared to 1 year ago for the past 22 consecutive weeks. As houses are taking longer to sell, this has contributed to the rise of housing supply. But there's kind of this lid or cap on that due to the lack of new supply in the market. But wait, there's more. Number 1, because we haven't really talked really much about rates so much in today's video, and especially the changes over the past two months. So number 1, the average 30-year fixed rate, mortgage rate, of course, were close to, keywords there were, close to a 1.5-year low about 2 months ago. But now they're very close to a 2-month high. Housing affordability has improved somewhat due to a decline of rates. So for example, 1 year ago, average mortgage rates were approaching 8%. And now today, which is on October 15th, we're around 6.6%. But housing affordability still remains a big issue due to elevated home prices, and in some areas, a huge increase in home insurance rates, such as areas in Texas and Florida, for example. Housing affordability constraints can be seen by the near record low level of pending home sales in August, according to the National Association of Realtors, lower than the Great Recession, for example. So a measure of contracts being signed between buyers and sellers this August was lower than 2008. Absolutely crazy. NAR's PHSI, which is our pending home sale index for August, was the second lowest reading ever for data that goes back to the year of 2001. Number 2, the most recent stats regarding mortgage purchase applications, according to the MBA, those actually increased by 8% year over year. Also, the National Association of Realtors, or NAR, reported that pending home sales for existing houses in August actually decreased by 3% compared to August of 2023. In contrast, new home construction sales, I say that because the U.S. Census Bureau defines a new home sale as a sales agreement signed between a buyer and a home builder or a deposit taken from the home builder. So that's really acting more like a pending home sale. So looking at the same time frame, August, new home sales rose by 9.8% year over year. In contrast, again, existing houses or contracts being signed for existing houses decreased by 3%. Therefore, home builders are boosting sales by offering sales incentives to home buyers, such as a lower rate or a closing cost credit, for example. But they're still facing strong headwinds due to the fact that they have approximately the highest levels of the new houses for sale going back to 2008. In the greater Sacramento area, though, every market's different. New home sales this August were the second highest for that month since August of 2004. The only other year for August that's higher than this August was back in 2020. Therefore, new home sales in the greater Sacramento area were the second highest levels this August in the past 20 years for that month. Number 3, looking forward for the nation as a whole, asking prices are down, inventory's up, homes are sitting on the market longer, and price reductions are more common now than they were in 2019. We have been moving towards a buyer's market, but every housing market's different. Inventory in California is down by 23% this September compared to September of 2019. But inventory is up by about 10% during that same time frame in Texas, Idaho, Florida, and Tennessee. Number 4, the most important one, of course, I appreciate you guys so much for watching today's video. And of course, if you guys got any value, then please hit the like button. Also, you can find me on realestateteamfinder.com. If you want to get connected with a great real estate agent or apply for a mortgage loan here in California, because of course I am a licensed loan officer and a real estate agent serving the greater Sacramento area. With that said, thank you so much for watching today's video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next video. Have an amazing day.